Hi there, I'm Gary, welcome to my channel and welcome back if you've been here before. Today is day one of the build of the Austin K2Y or KATY ambulance in 1/35th scale from Gecko Models. Now this is quite a detailed kit, so today's part is about the chassis, the engine, running gear and suspension. So at the end of today's show will be were we building one for real, it'd be a running chassis basically, ready to start the bodywork in the next program. If you enjoy the show, as usual, please do remember to give the Imperial thumbs up on the like button down there. And if you haven't done so yet, please do subscribe to the channel. You can do it by clicking on the small logo down there in the bottom right corner. And when you get the option, why not click on the bell logo as well? That means you'll be notified every time a new video pops up on the channel. And of course you've got the back catalogue to wade through at your leisure. If you want to make a more concrete contribution to the running of the channel, you can do it say through Super Thanks or any of my partner programs. Details of all of these are in the information box below. That's all that done. Let's get on then with starting to make the K2Y ambulance in 1/35th from Gecko Models.
Right, first job is to put together the two halves of this front cross member here. All the other cross members are in single pieces. This one, I guess it's like a box section, needs to be glued together. Then we need to put all the cross members onto one of the chassis rails. This first one's going to be the most tricky because the fit is a little difficult. There we go. There's a tiny, I'm sure on here there's a, if it will focus on here, there we go. There's just here there's this notch that the crossmember sits on, but you can see how there's just a little indent in the top edge of that rail, and that's where it sits in. It sits in very firmly when it's there. Then we have this next cross member. I'm going to guess this one has something to do with the engine. There we go. Just working our way along the chassis rail really. Each one's got its own little unique thing. This one's got a U-shaped cutout that we need to fit over. And I will say all the cutouts are absolutely spot on. We'll do the next one later. All the cutouts are totally spot on. They're really nice fit and the right shape and everything. They're just very, very good fit. Okay, so now I'm going to do this one when the two sides are in because it just sort of sits on top. And then we just put the other rail on top, like so, lining up all of the different cross members again. As I say, this last cross member, there's just a little tab it sits on top of, so it just sort of sits across the two. It's other way up, of course. Is it? Yeah. There we go. It sits like that. Just sits on top of the tab on either side. You get that. And there. That's it. And that's all the structural cross members done. Right, now the front suspension leaf springs go on first. They sort of snuggle up to these sort of shackles at here already. They sort of go on sort of up, touch against the side. The bottom of the part rests on the chassis rail, and the top sort of comes together like that, so it looks like these are chassis mountings, and they have got like shackles on them. One very slightly confusing thing, and you know, it's a small thing, I know, but you know, sometimes you think, gosh, you could maybe think about this. Here's C, okay. Now I need part C 51. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, 23, 25, 20. You're lovely. 40, 48, 50, 49, 50. Where's 51? 51, of course, is up here between 16 and 17. I don't understand that, but every now and again you're going to have to go hunting. There's 2 parts here that I need for this. Everything else is on C. These 2 tiny parts, here, you can just about see them, are on sprue DA. Yeah. Maybe it's because it's for different versions, got different little bits and pieces, I don't know. But there's 2 little linkages in the front spring damper mechanism that, you know, why are they on different sprues? The layout's occasionally going to be a bit weird, but the pieces are there. I promise you the pieces are there. You just every now and again might need to search around a little bit. Okay, so now I'm going to put the damper pot, you know, we call them shock absorbers. They're not shock absorbers, they're dampers. Okay, they damp the action of the spring, the dampers. This got on the side, you can see the inside bit's got a hole and 2 lugs. The outside bit, the lugs are further set back. So inside one, the lugs and the thing with the hole are closer together. That goes on there. See, if this was an Airfix kit, it'd be like skill level 48 or something. This is quite crazy amount of detail. So put it on like this. Yay! Almost. There we go. That's right way up as well. Next on is the damper linkage from the spring, which I've managed to break into while I was trying very hard to clean up the ends. So I hope this is going to go on, and then I can kind of line them up afterwards. Must be quite painful to watch. You must be thinking, oh Gary, how are you doing? Please don't stress over this tiny teeny tiny part. But you know, if I don't, then people are going to say, oh, you didn't do the proper linkage there between this and that. You missed out the gear flange support plate bracket or whatever. So I'm going to do my best. You know, I'm not a great modeler. I freely admit I'm not a great modeler. But you know, I try my best, and I am trying my best for this one because it's pretty bleeding special, to be perfectly honest. Okay, well look, that's going to do fine. You missed all of that trauma. Sorry, I wasn't showing you on camera properly. You missed the trauma. Okay, I'm going to just dash that in, and that is actually just going to partly melt those, just enough to straighten out. My goodness, what a rescue that is. And right, well, I think I've got there. So this bit was the wrong end of the lever. The lever was upside down and broken. I've put the valve in, the damper pot there. The damper arm is there, connected to the bottom of the actuator arm there. So it's kind of right. I just need to get this bit sorted out. Do you know what? mate of mine was telling me about building a tank. His kids had bought him a 1/35th scale Tiger or something, and he said, oh, the parts went up to sprue J. I think it was an Airfix one or an Academy one, obviously, if it's Airfix. And the complexity and all that, making tracks and stuff like that. Do you know what? This is an ambulance, and it feels as difficult as that. But I think that's okay. So what I'm going to do is leave that alone now, let that dry, and then I'll try and duplicate that on the other side. Okay, so if you don't break this, it's actually a lot easier. So my advice is don't break this part if you can avoid it, because it's quite good if it ain't broken to go on. It will go on nicely. If you do it without breaking stuff first, it all goes on together an awful lot more easily, I have to say. It actually goes together really nicely. So try not to break this arm here if you can. It will just sit on there perfectly, sit in place perfectly with the actuator, and everything's grand. I should point out that all of the foregoing trauma has got us to the end of page 1 of the instructions. This kind of gives you an idea of how intricate this is going to be. But we'll kick on and we'll do our best. Now the rear suspension, the leaf springs go into 2 little holes on the side of the chassis rail like that. Just make sure it's upright, and let that settle down for a bit. Then there's a couple of brackets that need to go on. First at this end is a piece DA11. It just sort of sits snugly on top of there. And at the other end, this cap piece here goes on. On this side it's C30, the other side it's C29. Okay, so next onto the chassis rail we have this strengthening beam. I guess that's what it is. I am going to be guessing quite a lot what these parts actually are. Alright, I don't really know these vehicles well enough to be able to confidently say, oh yeah, that's a gear flange support plate bracket, that is, mate. But that looks like a strengthening plate to me. Anyway, so 1 on each side. Then there are 4 of these little clamps that go on. They sort of slide over the top and sit there. Now, how does they? I think the little knobbly bit in the middle sits in the hole, but it doesn't reach it. That's kind of annoying. Okay, let's try it the other way around. Yeah. See, the knob is further over to this side than this side, yeah? That's the trick, that's the mistake we make. Remember folks, I make mistakes, so you don't have to. Okay, that then sits in that hole there. Like that, and we'll put a bit of extra thin glue just to tack that in place. So with all of that done, we now have completed the second page of instructions. We're really motoring along now. Okay, so next is the rear differential box. That just closes up with a cap piece like that, and a bit of extra thin. Then there's the end of the coupling, universal coupling, goes on there. It's got a little wedge shape on it, so that lines itself up. And there's a little square tab as well. Then the rear diff sits on top of the springs. So the chassis is really coming together now. Now the instructions say to build a couple of wheels, the back wheels, and the brake plates and wheels on. I'm not going to do that at the moment because I want to make sure I can paint everything first, then worry about that. So I will continue probably with the engine next. Onto the engine, and the main block comes in two parts, in two halves, that just simply glued together. Then on the top is the rocker cover. Oh, listen to me, rocker cover, like I actually know what I'm talking about. Alright, make sure it goes on the wrong way, the right way round. What's it, the wrong way round? Right way round. This side has got all that, the ports here, inlet and exhaust ports and whatever. And we need to make sure if the inlet and exhaust ports are this side, then the oil cap goes towards that end. Like so. And the sump, can see this notch on the rear is offset to one side. Make sure it's like this. Then the engine goes on top like that. So again, inlet and exhaust ports are on this side to orient it. There's also a notch at the back of the engine that can help you orient as well. And this is jolly. It's our first piece of photo etch. It's the cover for the dipstick. So let's put a tiny bit of super glue there. Get our grease pencil. Pick up our bit of photo etch, which is really, really, really tiny. There we go. And place it on top. And then push it into place to set. And there we are. Our first piece of photo etch on the kit. Wasn't that worth it? Quite remarkable. Then we start the ancillaries on the engine. This, I think, is an oil filter or a fuel filter. I suspect an oil filter because it's quite low on the crankcase. Okay, so next is the exhaust manifold. I'll tell you what, I'm pretty sure you're glad I do this as an edited thing and I don't do it live, because this would be one long video if I was doing this live. Okay, that's the exhaust manifold, and just need the inlet manifold now. So here's the inlet manifold. It sits in between the exhaust manifold pieces. There we go. Okay, I've put the engine on a bit of blue tack to hold it steady now, because there's a lot of pieces that go on vertically or whatever and need to balance. So this is the carburetor, I'm going to guess, as it sits on top of the inlet manifold and has what appears to be an air filter on it. This comedy little piece here, I mean, this is this. Can you see that? Yeah, that little grey thing there? That's the oil cap. That's the filler cap for the oil. That's supposed to go on top of the engine. honestly, is there another version of this engine with a different filler cap? Because otherwise, why not just mould the blasted thing in? There you go, that's all we've got to do. Keep that upright. There we are. Thank goodness for that. Right, some more bits of the engine here. Fly. No, it's not flywheel, isn't it? The flywheel's going to be somewhere else. I know what this bit is, but I know it fits there. This is the, I guess, water filter is on here. This is the line from the radiator into the engine. Another bit of the engine goes on here. And the fan belt timing gear that goes all on here at the front. Then the fan goes on the front as well. The gearbox comes, the main part of the gearbox anyway, comes in two halves that sit together thus. And we just let them set nicely, and then we can just clean it up a little bit. And the drive coupling comes out the front end, like so. Now the bell housing for the clutch goes together as well. And there's just a piece that fills in the base here. There we go. It goes on there. Then that joins onto the gearbox, like so. Another piece goes in here. Now I'm beginning to not know what this is. I guess that's like a collector sump for the oil filter, maybe. I don't know. Then this, what looks like a filter again, goes on the side. As well. Then on this side of the engine we have the distributor, and finally we have the alternator. Then the drive components here, like a midway support for the prop shaft. There's two pieces here that join together. Then this kind of, there's like two half moon pegs. These sits as a gap. Yep, front part of this, part of the prop shaft just sort of sits in there. Then the rear half of the prop shaft sits into that, housing that, and then eventually it goes in. This isn't an easy fit, have to say, but it does go in eventually. There we go. Gearbox goes on the back of the engine, like so. I'm going to leave that to dry, and we'll paint that in the morning, as indeed we will the chassis so far, and the next few bits. There's one more bit of prop shaft to come out the front, so we'll paint that as well. Paint all of these bits. Then it can all sit in. The only thing to go in then will be the exhaust, which we'll paint separately as well. And I'll probably be in a position to put the back wheels on then as well, because everything will be painted. Okay, I'm going to assemble the wheel now. I must point out this is the assembly if you're not planning on having the wheels turning. So I'm just going to glue everything together. If you're planning on having the wheels turning, there's another way of doing it, which is a lot more complicated, and they go together the same, but there's bits you glue and bits you don't glue, and lining them up and stuff like that. I really can't be bothered with all that. So what I am going to do is the way you do it if you're having the wheels not turning. Okay, first of all, on the back of the inside tyre, inside wheel, here, there we go, on the back of this, there's this ring here and a notch in it, and we're just going to very simply put this inside rim on like so. Okay, it sits like thus. Now in here on the inside there, we're going to put, first of all, we are going to put this cone shit, and the thinner bit of the cone goes in to the middle like this. Then outside that is a hub. Now this hub has to go over this cone. It is really quite stiff, so what we do, we put it on the ground like that, put it on our mat like this, and we will put the cone in. I suppose it's a bearing of some sort or something, I don't know. And then the hub goes on top, and we are going to have to press that on, and it's a really tight fit. Okay, you do risk actually compressing the part slightly, but you know, as Boris says, them's the brakes. You can be a bit more careful than I am, and it will sit in there. That is then the inner part of the hub. We take our tyre, outer part of the tyre of course, because some of this hub is also tyre, and we put this, or is this the outer part of the tyre, isn't it? There you go. I slot that in. I have to move it around a bit to make sure it's on the tabs. The tabs are there to stop it going too far. There we go. Then on the other side we have the inside wall of the tyre. There we go. That drops into place. Then on the very outside we have a cover, which is essentially the end of the axle. And there it is. That's the wheel. So that's two wheels done. Those are the back wheels, the driving wheels on this vehicle. So again, we're going to leave everything to set up overnight. Been a long and occasionally frustrating day. We'll fill in things, we'll tidy up things, and then tomorrow we'll paint some stuff, and then we'll continue with the build. Right, welcome back then, and what I've done this morning, I made a quick start earlier on. I've sprayed this, primed it, and then sprayed the chassis in dark green, and also the engine. Now I've looked online for references to the Series D, I think this is, engine. All of them seem to be painted sort of green like everything else, so I've done that. What I have changed, however, is I've obviously done the alternator in metal. I've done the top of the distributor in black. Just picked up the ends of the spark plugs in silver just because I could. Done this hose here in black with some silver Jubilee clips on it. Fan is black. The fan belt is black. I've done the carburetor body in aluminium. I've done the filter black, and I've just put a bit of brass on top of the this sort of filler here and the oil where the dipstick goes, I guess, down there. Okay, so that's just sort of brightening it up a bit. I'll give it a wash of black as well, and maybe a little bit of brushed highlighting later on. So on we go then. Next thing is to just tidy that engine up and then put it into the chassis and get along with making this Katy. Right, so what I'm going to do now is just a little bit of dry brushing with some sort of, it's green that's had quite a bit of white added to it. Actually, when I looked at it, I put it on the palette and thought, yeah, that's about right. And then I realised it actually looks really, really, really like Sky Type S. So Sky Type S with just a little splash of white is probably going to do the job for you if you don't want to mix your own colour down. But just go around, just kind of just knock the edges a bit with it. You know, these things, I know the Princess Elizabeth was driving it and working on it, so it should have been pretty much pristine, but they never are they? I mean, you know, it's end of the day, it's an army vehicle, so as lovely as it probably was in many respects, I'm sure the engine has got little bits of wear on it. It might look a little aggressive as well at times. The colour might just be a bit bright, but remember this is going to be sitting inside the body, so it really needs quite strong highlights to pick it out. Also, excuse me. Also, I'm going to be doing a bit of detail wash on this as well, so there'll be some proper shadows in some of these parts as well. So we need some decent highlights as to sort of stand up against it. But just work your way around the engine. The there we go. Actually, it's not looking too bad. The front I'll do just with the white. Just pick that out on the fan belt, for example, and the fan. And then I'll do a bit of detail wash as well to just sort of put some shadows in now. I've put some highlights in. The next thing I'm adding to the engine is on the exhaust. I'm just adding some dark rust because it would have burnt off any paint, even enamel, on the exhaust here. This dark rust is just a bit of dark rust weathering powder that just added a bit of water to, just so it's got a tiny little bit of a wash feel to it. Okay, there we go. That's the exhaust manifold, gone a bit rusty. It's actually burnt off all the paint probably. Then I've got like a medium rust just to go on the top, just a tiny little bit of highlighting. This sort of thing, you know, it doesn't take much to do, but it really adds to the look of things, I think, anyway. You don't need to be too precise as well, you know, because this is going inside the cabin, or inside the hood. You don't have to be too desperately precise about everything, but little sort of glimpses of things really make a difference. The powders I'm using, by the way, these are Humbrol ones. They come in a set. Here is aging powders pack. They're actually pretty good. I have to say that because I was given them free, but no, I'm kidding. They are actually pretty good. You can use them just for sort of dabbling on stuff. There's also an aging one. That's the aging one. There's also a weathering one as well. The only thing is, I would say to them, right, you know, you've got this lovely. Why do I have to write on the top what it is? Could they not have stuck something on or printed something on? Because, you know, some of these colours get a bit confused at times. You have to go back and say, right, which is which. Other than that, I actually don't know how much they cost, but you know, they seem to last a long time and they seem to do a good job. So there we go. Okay, so that's drying, and as you see, as soon as it dries, it forms this lovely matte rusty colour. Now the exhaust itself, I've already painted in steel, and the part up here where the downpipe comes out of the engine, I'm just going to dab some of that rust over it. Not all the way, just a little bit, just a sort of bit of a colour to it, just knock off a bit that colour, because you know it will get tarnished and rusty and all that, because these weren't stainless steel. Obviously I wouldn't imagine stainless steel would be far too valuable a commodity at this time, so I would imagine these are going to be pretty much box standard iron, so they're going to rust quite a lot. You can also, of course, do a bit of rusting on the actual things like the silencer, silencer box and muffler box as well. Just put a bit around like that, and then wet brush and brush it around just to make it look a bit used. Don't go too crazy, obviously, because these things they're not like on a battlefield or a desert or anything, but you know, you can just give them a little hint of colour. Again, quite often it's all about hints of colour. It's all about just sort of picking up bits and pieces rather than really heavily colouring something up. I'll let that dry, see how we go. And there we go. They can see how the dark wash, after we've done a bit of highlighting, the dark wash then fills in the gaps underneath here, and it really brings up some contrast. I really like this. It's done a good job. And now it's all done, I can put the engine into the chassis, onto the chassis. You can see there's like two L-shaped lugs that sits on that, and then it sits on the cross member behind, and that's jolly good. And the final piece of the drivetrain here is this forward drive shaft. That's what you call them, drive shafts. Goodness, I'll forget my name next. Forward drive shaft just sort of sits in place there, and we'll just put a bit of cement in to tack it in place, and then that's done. Then the exhaust connects up at this end. This little peg it sits on. And it also sits into this bracket here. Might just need to get that in place a bit better. There we go, lovely. So that sits up at that end, and then the muffler silencer sits in its bracket here. Lovely job. Right, this cross piece goes on to the top of the suspension here. This is going to be the front, this steering arm and all that sort of stuff is all going to go on this, so it's like supporting the front wheels basically. So next we're building, I guess, the front hub. This is a very tricky piece, right? So we've got a tiny little piece here, and it's got to fit into this square bit here with the hole in it pointing upwards, because this is going to connect to the steering cross member, steering rack, I guess. And there's another piece, pretty much identical, but that one, the hole in it has got to point downwards. There we go, so that one goes in here. Now the idea is that this will sit on the end of the cross member, holding it up, and then the steering arm will attach to this, and if you don't glue these little bits on to the end of the steering arm, then you'll be able to move them and the steering will work. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to glue everything in place, because that just still seems wrong to me. It just seems too fiddly and too tricky, and the pieces are just too small to do that. So I'm gluing them in place. These holes are supposed to fit over these tiny little studs at the end of the arm here. Now what I'm going to do, that's almost right, isn't quite right, but it's almost right, because the top one's moved a little bit. But I'm just going to put a bit of glue in here. Then just tap down the top one to make sure it's got a nice connection, and then just put it in place. And I'm going to let that rest and set before I start on the other one. Now for the front wheels, there's this small sort of hub type thing, locking hub, and it goes in. Now if you want the wheels to turn, you don't glue this in place. Okay, there's this will lock up against here, and somehow you're going to put the hub through there, axle through there, and tack it on, and it's not going to mess everything else up. I think that's nonsense. I really don't know if that's going to work. I don't mind anyway, so I will just put a bit of glue on. There we go. Then this piece goes on the inside of this wheel center, this wheel rim, whatever. Let's make sure it sits. There we go, clicks into place. Again, a bit more glue. Then this piece goes onto the tyre. Just need to rotate it so it clicks into place. You can probably see the back here. Yep, that's in place. And then on the other side of the tyre, get it roughly lined up. It's going to go about there. And just tweak it so it goes in. And then a bit of glue all around to hold it in place. The next piece of the steering arm goes on here on the back of the plate here. It's actually going onto the top of those two little bearings we had earlier, hinges we had earlier, and the same on the other side. And lastly, this steering arm needs to connect at both ends to the bits connecting to the wheels. That's quite close. Close. Yay, that went better than I thought. I am just going to reinforce that with a little bit extra glue. Otherwise, that was pretty slick, I have to say. Again, let that all rest up and dry, because that's the front end actually done. Right, so now there's another piece that goes on here. Of course we're not finished. Silly of me to think so. There we go. I don't know what this is. Someone will know. My mate Neil would know. But I don't, I'm afraid. There you go. It's on whatever it is. And I've joined these two pieces together, and they then connect up with whatever this thing is. I'm going to leave it at that, and then put the cable on later, the pipe or whatever, and it will have to do it. I don't know where that's supposed to go. So while I'm waiting for all of that to set, I'll start painting the tyres. The fuel tanks are going on next. The ends just sort of slide into the body of the tank. Like so, then the other half goes on. Like so. Okay. Then the brackets go on. Now they just need to line up with those straps on the bodywork there. Like that. And the last bit to go on the tank is, of course, the filler cap. Like that. The front wheels just simply sit against the back plate there, and the back wheels sit on the rear axle like so. Once the wheels are set properly, I will put the fuel tanks on, and I'm going to call it a day for part one, because the chassis will be essentially complete now.
There we go then, that's the chassis pretty much complete. I did tell you there's quite a lot to it, and there's more to come with the bodywork and everything else. This is an incredibly detailed kit, lots of small fiddly little parts, but when they all go together they just look amazing. So if you've enjoyed it, please do remember, thumbs up on the like button below, and if you haven't done so yet, please do remember to subscribe to the channel. Doesn't cost you anything, helps me enormously. In any case, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.